Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Renner, and I'm a fisheries biologist with the South Dakota Department of Game Fish and Parks based out of Fort Pierce, South Dakota, and I work in the Upper Missouri River Fisheries Management Area. Today, I'll be sharing with you some of the work that I've been doing to develop a standard weight equation for Goldeye in collaboration with Brett Miller from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, as well as Kyle Danda and Brexton Roth here at the South Dakota Department of Game Fish and Parks. So just a little bit of background to get started. Goldeye are a widely distributed forage fish that can be found across North America in both the United States and Canada. So they're native to the Mississippi, Ohio, Missouri, and Mackenzie River basins. They occupy deep pools and turbid waters of large mainstem rivers and lakes. Every year, spawning typically occurs each spring when water temperatures are between 10 and 13 degrees Celsius, with females spawning once a year, although there's evidence that only a fraction of females in each population are spawning annually. Goldeye can reach sexual maturity at 6 to 10 years old, usually 6 or 7 years for males, and then closer between 7 to 10 years for females. And they can live between 10 to 17 years old, again, with females tending to live longer. The oldest observed Goldeye recorded was 30 years old. Goldeye are unique in that males and females exhibit this unique sexual dimorphism of the anal fin. So as you can see here in these photos, the females kind of have this straight, long anal fin base, whereas the anal fin in males has a really distinct lobe that bumps out from it. So that's one way to differentiate between the two. So just a little bit of background on the Goldeye's taxonomy and etymology. They're one of two species of Hyodontids. So that family consists of the mooneye and the Goldeye. So the genus Hiodon comes from the Greek odus, referring to the Y-shaped hyoid arch along the roof of their mouth and tongue. And then the species epithet alosoides means shad-like, and so that refers to the river herrings, think, the Alosa genus. And that common name Goldeye refers to their uniquely large moon-shaped eyes suited there for low light foraging conditions. So it's important to start examining Goldeye because they're declining across their native range. So Goldeye are listed as vulnerable, imperiled, critically imperiled, or extinct, or presumed extirpated in 11 US states and Canadian provinces. And these declines are driven by a variety of factors, including historic overfishing, climate change, reservoir aging, habitat fragmentation, and the impact on that inhibition of larval drift by dams, and then increased predation by both native and non-native predators, such as blue catfish. So Goldeye were first described by the Lewis and Clark expedition back in June of 1805, when Meriwether Lewis compared them to hickory shad. But their first commercial harvest was in 1876, when they were used for dog food and fertilizer. And up in Canada, the Lake Winnipeg Goldeye fishery boomed in the early part of the 19th and 20th centuries. It boomed in the 1920s and then collapsed rapidly after overexploitation in the 1930s. But there are still folks that do some commercial harvests exist to this day. Smoked Goldeye are a delicacy in the Winnipeg area, and the Winnipeg Goldeye baseball team is a recognition of the importance of this commercial fishery to the local economy over the past century. So Goldeye present some unique opportunities for anglers. They are frequently surface feeders, and they can be caught using dry flies during mayfly hatches, or you can catch them on small spinners and worm rigs. And so they do provide some fishing opportunities. It's just that not all fisheries management agencies are promoting them as a potential fishing opportunity. Goldeye are also obligate hosts to federally endangered spectacle case pearly mussels in the St. Croix River. And so they do provide that unique host stage for that species. Goldeye are not considered a game fish or actively managed in many US states. They're frequently misidentified by anglers as gizzard shad or other, just silvery gray prey fish. And then South Dakota Department of Game Fish and Parks does not include Goldeye in its Proud Angler program. We don't regulate harvest. We hardly collect data on them outside of our standardized gill net surveys. And so recently, a study by some of my collaborators in Kansas, Brett Miller and his colleagues, evaluated some of the catch rates over time and looked at population dynamics for Goldeye in 2 reservoirs, Milford and Lovewell reservoirs. And they documented this pattern of population decline over time. And so as you can see, this graph here on the left in this figure, they seem to have declined after the first introduction, the first documented natural reproduction of blue catfish in the system. So there might be a correlation there between some predation pressure in the system and the decline of the species over time. So for this study, Brett reached out to me and we talked about how we had some data sets from the Missouri River. And so we continued working with Kyle Winders and Juju Wellemeyer to develop a standard weight equation for Goldeye using as many population sources as we could find. So we developed a standard weight equation. So we sought to develop an equation using the regression line percentile and the empirical percentile techniques. And then we also wanted to develop standard length categories for the species. So to do this, we compiled length and weight data from 64,552 Goldeye from 98 populations to develop that equation. And these represented 10 US states and 3 Canadian provinces, as well as both lotic systems and lentic ecosystems. So we had contributions from both. And so to get started to develop the RLP technique, we did weight precision by evaluating or by plotting the variance to mean ratio of log 10 transformed weight data by 1 centimeter length intervals. And then the minimum length where weight was determined to be accurate was set to where the variance to mean ratio did not exceed 0.1. And so the variance to mean ratio of log 10 weight was below 0.01 for Goldeye, greater than or equal to 160 millimeters. So 160 was the minimum length included in the weight regressions. For each population, the weight length regressions of log 10 transformed data were then used to model the mean weights in 1 centimeter length intervals. And then our proposed standard weight equation was the 75th percentile of the mean weights regressed on the length. And so we came up with this equation. So the log 10 over weight equals 2.966 times log 10 of the length minus 4.949. Then for our empirical percentile technique, this technique utilizes weighted regressions using that 75th percentile of the mean log 10 weights and the log 10 midpoints for each of those length categories. And so Kim Bonvecchio and her colleagues just published a demonstration of this technique. So these equations are weighted by the number of populations that had data available for each length category in line with Ken Garrow's old paper from 2005. And so using this technique, we found using the EMPL technique, we had a log 10 weight equals 3.047 times the log 10 of the length minus 5.144. And then for the EMPQ technique, we used log 10 of the weight equals 0.750 times the log 10 of the length plus 0.466 times the log 10 of the length squared minus 2.324. We also developed standard length categories in line with Clark Gablehouse's work. And so the International Game Fish Association recognizes the world record Goldeye as 520.7 millimeters total length. And so building off of that, using that as our world record Goldeye length, we developed the following categories. So stock Goldeye would be 130 millimeters, quality would be 200 millimeters total length, preferred would be 260, memorable would be 330, and trophy would be 400 millimeters total length. And so just in closing, this was really preliminary work to try to just develop some of these standard weight equations. Our next step is to apply these equations to some of our data from the Missouri River here on Lake Oahe and Lake Sharp in South Dakota, and to evaluate the efficacy of these equations in characterizing populations, and then to start comparing patterns in Goldeye populations across the range. But in general, this study provides just a basic attempt at developing a standard weight equation for a species that's commonly overlooked. And having these equations can help fisheries managers begin to collect data and compare them across populations to assess declines and to assess growth rates, age structure, size structure, populations, which can be useful for conservation evaluation, conservation efforts. And so with that, I'd like to thank our collaborators, Kyle Winders and Juju Wellemeyer, as well as the statistical guidance of Kim Bonvecchio, Hey Kim, and Ben Neely. And then I've got too many people to list here, but a lot of folks to thank that provided data sources for this, that collected a lot of these fish and weighed and measured them in standard surveys. And so there was a lot of data sitting around from different states and provinces that was gray literature that hadn't been incorporated into any of this. So we're grateful for those folks for compiling this for us. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. I'm sorry I can't be with you in Grand Rapids, but feel free to reach out to me. My email's here, and along with my social media contacts. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. Take care.